In a few minutes, you will hear from Director Valerie Williams, who is passionate about ensuring that all children have access to quality education. Director Williams serves as a director in the Office of Special Education Programs, or in our world, we love acronyms, OSEP. So within the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services at the U.S. Department of Education. She is responsible for overseeing the administration of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, which authorizes formula grants to states under IDEA Part B and C. IDEA also authorizes discretionary grants under IDEA Part D to institutions of higher ed and other nonprofit organizations to support grants for state personnel development, technical assistance and dissemination, technology, parent training, and information centers. Director Williams has decades of experience, which includes supporting state-level special education leaders by overseeing federal government public policy activities, federal government public policy regulatory affairs, public relations, and key initiatives to promote and guide positive systemic change, thereby improving outcomes for students with disabilities. She also served as the Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Public Policy Fellow on the U.S. Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, advancing disability policy and civil rights. Prior to that, she managed the budgeting and finances for numerous multi-million programs within the departments of the Navy and the Air Force and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. She has a unique perspective, having worked with members of Congress and staff on Capitol Hill, with advocacy organizations, supporting state special education leaders, and most importantly, being the parent of a son with Down syndrome. Today, Director Williams will give you insights on recent guidance issued by OSEP and how you can access and engage with OSEP's wide range of resources. Her inspiring words reflect the importance of supporting families and children with disabilities. Please give a warm welcome to Director Valerie Williams.
Good morning. Oh no. Nope, nope, nope. I saw you drinking your coffee, eating your pastries, chatting it up this morning, and so I know you're awake. Good morning. All righty then. So, out of curiosity, one of the questions that I typically ask when I get in a room is how long people have been in their position, because it varies wildly across the country. And so, show of hands, if you've been in your job 5 years or less, please raise your hand for me. Okay, 7 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 or more. Congratulations and thank you. I go places across the country where the majority of the room has been in their job like 3 years or less. 3 years or less. And by the time you get to 25 or more, there's no one left. And there are places that I've been where the majority of the room has been in their job 15 or 20 years or more. And so it varies wildly, and I think that also plays into why we see some of what we see in various states, because there's been a lot of turnover at every level, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But I want to do the same thing Nancy did. I typically start off my presentations by thanking everyone in the room, because the leadership that you have shown over the last handful of years has not gone unnoticed. There have been things taking place in our system that are not just unusual, things that we will probably never have to deal with again. I pray that we will never have to deal with again. And you've done a lot to hold our system together, sometimes literally with tears and duct tape. And I recognize that. And it's a lot. And your jobs are not easy. So in addition to Nancy's thank you, I want to thank you personally from the bottom of my heart, because it makes a difference and it means something, because our kids are important. I like this slide. I like to bring in pictures of kids because I think it grounds us and it grounds our work. But we all know, because part of your theme is outcomes, we're all here for the same reason. In terms of the work that you've done over the last handful of years, I think everyone is aware that the pandemic presented a lot of challenges for our system. Honestly, a lot of the issues that we saw were not new. They were things that were magnified and exacerbated that already existed, but they just took a different turn. So we know our kids missed out on a lot. We're still dealing with that, and quite honestly, we're probably going to be dealing with that for some time to come. But what I do want you to know is that the pandemic presented many opportunities, right? Our systems are typically slow. They're just slow. We are slow to identify a problem. We're slow to schedule a meeting. We're slow to get together. We're even slower to make a decision. And then we're really, really, really slow to implement the decision, right? Our systems are just painfully slow. But during the pandemic, we didn't have the luxury of time. So we had to move quickly, we had to think quickly, we had to act quickly, which means that we can do it, right? So there's no need to fall back into old patterns and old habits. And there are some things that we did during the pandemic that we need to hold on to. And we need to remember what we did, how we did it, and continue to do things. Some of them are big things. Some of them are small things, like virtual IEP meetings. If a parent doesn't want to come in person, then there's no reason for them to ever have to do that again. Some things are simple, but we don't have to fall back into the old patterns and the old habits. So how do we figure out what went well, what worked for us, how we can harness that and move that forward? Because I think during that time, it was interesting. We saw more collaboration, more partnership, more coordination than we have ever seen before. And we did not have a choice, and it came together organically. And so how do we continue that? How do we continue to see families as partners that we should engage with? I would argue that it's not a them and a us. I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but there are a lot of places where they feel like families are them, right? And we are us. We know what we're doing. We're trying to advance this child forward, this district. We're working on whatever initiatives. It's not a them and us. Advocates are not the other. It's a collective we. And the collective we can do better. We must do better. I don't necessarily think we need to go back to what was going on before the pandemic, because things were not operating well for all of our kids then, in all honesty. And so we don't need to go back. But how do we harness those lessons that we learned? What do we do when we know that things are grossly inadequate? Adults, by definition, want to be comfortable. And it's okay. We want to eat what we want to eat when we want to eat it. We don't want to be too hot. We don't want to be too cold. Adults want to be comfortable. And that's okay. But we can't be comfortable and complacent where our kids are concerned. Because our kids do not have the luxury of time to wait while the adults that run the system figure out how to get it right. A year in the lifetime of a student is forever. So how do we think about our work differently? I've been talking to the staff for the last handful of years I've been at OSEP. If you were coming to your job and it was brand new, would you look at it the same way? Would you ask the same questions? What would you do differently? And I encourage you to do the same. I think that what we're facing now, we will probably never face again. But it's going to take a coordinated effort for us to deal with what we're dealing with right now. And so there are a handful of things that I think we all need to commit to. We all need to commit to. One is effective implementation of the law, which sounds like a simple thing, but it's not necessarily. Effective implementation of the law. A lot of people want to reauthorize IDEA, and I'll talk about IDEA in a little bit, which is fine. It's been quite some time. But changing the words on the paper will not make a difference if we're not implementing the intent of the law. So we all need to commit to effective implementation. We need to be intentional, right? Are we using data to drive our decisions? And I'll talk some more about data in a little bit. We need to go back to basics. There are a lot of new people in our field, a lot, at every level of education. So, and I think everyone is here for the right reason, because we want to see good outcomes, we want to uplift our kids, we want to make sure that when they leave us, things go well, but we can't assume that everybody knows what to do. We can't assume that everyone knows what resources are available to help them. So how do we go back to basics and level set things so we make sure that everyone is aware of what's out there, what their responsibility is, and how things should be going? We need to collectively raise our expectations for what we believe our kids are capable of. And you guys are getting more and more quiet, but that's okay. We need to collectively raise our expectations for what our kids are capable of. We should not be assuming that certain children should be taking certain assessments, belong in certain buildings. I need you to be brave, to be bold, and to be urgent, because our kids deserve that. So one of the things I'm going to be looking for in the listening session that I do later is to find out how we can better support you. What are you seeing? What is going on? If you had a magic wand and you could wave it and change a few things, what would that look like? And how can we partner with you to help make that happen? You're going to have a ton of information coming at you in these next couple days, and you're probably going to feel like you're being fire hosed, and that's okay. But figure out where you want to start, because you want to have a meaningful and tangible impact. And go deep, don't go wide. You're only one person, okay? In terms of the IDEA anniversary, believe it or not, we're coming up on 50 years. 50 years of IDEA. And a lot of people that work in our field don't even recognize that before IDEA was passed, our kids weren't even in the school building. Our kids were either in institutions or they were at home with their parents. They were not allowed in the building. And I have met and talked to parents who had a child, and the doctor said, well, first of all, the doctor didn't want to talk to the woman, asked where the husband was. I want to talk to your husband. And then proceeds to say, what institution do you want to put this child in? That's what was going on. I have talked to individuals with disabilities who are old enough to remember having been in institutions before they were allowed to go to school. So this is not a small, insignificant thing. IDEA has done wonders and transformed the experience of individuals with disabilities and children coming through it. That being said, we have done a lot. Our field has accomplished a lot, but we still have, I think everyone would agree, some work to do. So I started sticking this picture in because it just makes me happy. It's a picture of myself and my child at the happiest place on earth. You know where we were. And we just happened to be out there, and my husband just happened to catch this photo. I'll tell you some more about him as I go on, because I think it's pertinent. He's just one child, but there are stories that you will remember as I try to drive home some of the points. He, at the time, was in the 7th grade, middle school, now in the 8th grade. Middle school has been a great experience for me. If you still think there's time for it to go awry and for it to all go to hell, don't tell me, because I'm convinced middle school will continue to be great until the bitter end. Don't tell me, I'm going to hold on to that. Middle school is a very interesting age. And he happens to have Down syndrome. The school team, the school in general, and this has been the case all the way up until now, starting in early childhood, they don't know what I do for a living. And I have no intentions of telling them. None. My husband and I's attitude is we want to support them so that they can better support our child. I don't want anything that my child gets to be based on whatever job, whatever role, whatever title that I have. Because one of the things that literally keeps me up at night is there are parents who want to be involved, who want to be engaged, but they don't have the bandwidth for whatever reason. And there are a million valid reasons why parents cannot engage. But for those parents, is the system going to operate in the child's best interest regardless of the parent's involvement? And the answer is not always yes. And so what I'm striving for is, how do we change systems? How do we make it so that if a parent wants to be involved and can't, the system is still going to act in the best interest of the child? Literally what keeps me up at night. That's what I'm striving for. So my child's school system and his IEP team and everyone in the building, because everyone knows my child. He's just that child. They have no idea what I do for a living, and I plan on keeping it like that. There's no need to know. He's on the honor roll. He has been on the honor roll except for the first quarter of middle school, which was a little rocky because elementary school is not middle school, right? It takes a second to adjust. He's on the honor roll, and it's because he is doing the work. He is in co-taught and inclusive classes. When we left elementary school, we've always had great IEP teams. The IEP team wanted to send him not to our Boundary Middle School. They wanted to send him to another building where they have all the programs, and we'll do as much inclusion as we can. Lunch and recess is not inclusion. 15 minutes a day, it's not inclusion. It didn't sit well with my husband and I. We weren't quite sure what we were going to do at the moment, but we decided to take a visit to our Boundary Middle School. Got a hold of the special education coordinator. She walked us around, gave us a tour, told us about the school. We met the principal. We did all the things. They didn't rush us through. And at the end, we thought to ourselves, the adults are in control. The kids are learning. There's no reason why we shouldn't at least try this. Now, we knew it might not work, right? But we were prepared. If this doesn't work, we can pivot. We'll do something else. But we decided to send him to his Boundary Middle School on the regular bus for the first time since he was 3. They weren't coming to our door anymore. They're going to the bus stop. And he's been on the honor roll ever since. And it's because we took a chance and we decided to try. Did we know it was going to work out? No. And the IEP team didn't think it was going to work. But we told them before we left elementary school, we thank you for everything you've done, but we're going to disagree with your recommendation. We're going to do something else. My child also has been saying since 3rd or 4th grade that he wants to go to college. And I honestly don't know where he got that from, because we had never gotten to the point where we were having a conversation about college, right? At some point you start talking to your kids about the future. We had not had that conversation. He came home talking about, I want to go to college. So we actually went to a college fair earlier this year, because college is for everyone who wants to go. I will say that again. College is for everyone who wants to go. And if you don't know about Think College, I encourage you to look them up. There are over 300 programs across the country for students with moderate and significant support needs. Residential programs, live on campus, do all the things. And I'll talk to you some more about that in a little bit. So it took me a minute to get here, but why are we here? Okay. And I think everyone here wants to have a meaningful and substantive impact on our children. And you do have levers for change. It might be your authority, it might be your resources, it might be your influence. But everyone in this room has the ability to impact change. So as I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, my tenure as OSEP director is coming to an end. I came December 21. And so actually I'm coming up on 3 years. It feels like it's been a little longer, but that's okay. So it's been a tremendous 3 years, incredible 3 years. So I'm going to talk to you today about a lot of the, not just what we have done, but the resources. Because what I am finding and realized almost from the beginning, and I will talk about this a little bit more later too, is we have an information dissemination problem. And there are a countless amount of free resources available for you, and you would be shocked and surprised at how few people know what is available. These are free. I've got a lot of QR codes in this presentation, and hopefully if you don't already have it, you'll have access to this presentation later, because everybody loves a good QR code. And I wanted you to have something to walk away with. So not only will they be free, and you'll have access to them, you can feel free to share. I want you to share them. So I'm going to talk about some of the department's work and the large buckets of what we're doing. So we've been working under the initiative Raise the Bar, Lead the World, and this has been our call to action to transform education and unite around what we all know works, all of it grounded in experience, research, and evidence. Okay? We provided a lot of tools and a lot of resources, not just for states and districts, but for actual schools to advance in these 3 buckets, the focus areas. And I also want to add that with all the work that has been going on in the department, OSEP and OSERS has been very much a part of all of it, because this group at the department recognizes that disability crosses everything. We can't just stay in our silo and talk to ourselves about our own things, because children with disabilities are general education students first. That might be written on my tombstone, I'm not sure, I feel like I say that all the time, but, and everyone in this room knows that. Children with disabilities are general education students first, right? So let me go through some of these buckets and what's in it and what we have been doing. So achieving academic excellence is self-explanatory. Here we were talking about academic recovery and supporting the conditions that accelerate learning. So all the things that we know work. High intensity tutoring, strong access to STEM, I actually should say STEAM because we want to include the arts, improved funding for education, equitable student disciplinary practices, that's important. Expanding access to summer learning, enrichment, and after-school programs. The second bucket is boldly improving learning conditions. This is a big one. We're talking about supporting improved learning conditions and eliminating the personnel shortages. That's huge. And investing in every student's mental health. So we're talking about promoting better pay, working conditions, retention strategies. It's interesting because everyone probably knows, but if you weren't already aware, bringing people into the profession is not as much of a problem as you would think. It's keeping the people that come into the profession that's the problem. We have a retention problem. And if our folks don't feel supported, and if they don't have what they need, retention continues to be an issue. We're also talking about what I think about periodically is that when I was young, many years ago, 50 plus years ago, when I was young, if someone told you they were a teacher, you were, oh, you're a teacher. That's amazing. And how do we go from that to thinking anyone can teach? I don't know how did that happen? For a brief second during the pandemic, when a lot of children were home, learning virtually, which by the way, we now know virtual learning doesn't work for everyone. Kids were home, staring at computer screens all day. Parents were home. They had to be actively involved in their kids' learning in a way in which they had never done before. And for a split second, we recaptured some of that magic that was teachers. actually need to be trained. This is not something that just anyone can do. For a second, and then it dissipated again. I don't know what we need to do to get that back. We need to have a higher reverence and appreciation for the people that work with our kids, because it is not something that just anyone can do. We know that. We need to make sure everyone else knows that. We're not just talking about eliminating the teacher shortage, we're also talking about the instructional support personnel, the folks that round out the IEP team, right? PTs, OTs, speech therapists. If you have needed a speech therapist in the last 3-4 years and been able to find one in person, wow. Some of the disciplines that I mentioned, there are shortages of people. For some of them, there's no shortage of people, there's a shortage of them in the school setting, because there's no incentive for them to go in the school setting. They would rather go to hospitals or other places, right? So how do we eliminate all of those shortages? And shortages are a three-pronged issue in our minds. This is the way we've been thinking about it. One is that there's a shortage of people literally in the buildings in front of our kids. The second thing is that there's a pipeline issue, because over time there have been fewer people going into the profession, so a lot of programs to prepare our teachers have closed, okay? The third issue is a diversity issue. Our system is relatively homogeneous in who works in it. Just had this conversation a little bit ago. Relatively homogeneous. And so we have a diversity problem. Now, diversity is different everywhere you go. Diversity in the building should reflect the community. And so diversity in Montana looks very different from diversity in Florida or in California. But the building should reflect the community. So we know, and actually I'll go on to the, I'm having so many thoughts right now, and I just don't want to forget anything. So in recognizing the personnel shortages, one of the things that we want to do is kind of figure out and rethink, because there are a lot of good personnel prep programs across the country that do not get any OSEP funding. They have never gotten OSEP funding for whatever reason. So we were trying to figure out and rethink for the last handful of years, how do we figure out how to expand our applicant pool? Right? Because we have a shortage and it's going to be around for a moment. How do we make sure that the people that are doing more of the work can actually get some money? So we started revising our grant priorities so that we're actually increasing the number of folks that are going into the field at all levels, bachelor's, master's, PhD levels. Not just for educators, but also for related service providers. So we started to rethink all of our priorities. How can we push more people out in the field? How can we get more people out there who will be faculty at institutions of higher education? How do we put more money in the hands of the minority serving institutions, the Hispanic serving institutions, the historically black colleges and universities, and the tribal colleges that are also doing the work? How do we look at our work differently? And we've been able to do that. So during the pandemic, it was $2.2 billion of supplemental IDEA funds. And so we worked feverishly in the department with our other divisions, getting that money out into the field, providing guidance on mental health, the back to school roadmap, a lot of things. And we work closely with other divisions within the department. They are keenly aware that disability does not just rest with us, it crosses everything. So whether we're talking about career and technical education, whether we're talking about ed tech, whether we're talking about our Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, we are partnering and collaborating with them and have been since the beginning. And we do that partially because we know it's necessary and our kids deserve it, but also because we want to imitate and show what good partnership and collaboration looks like, because that's what we want to see in the States. This last bucket here is creating pathways for global engagement, and this speaks to what happens when our kids leave us and making sure we have better opportunities for them. So our vision and our mission, you probably know this, but it's a world in which individuals with disabilities have unlimited opportunities to learn and lead purposeful lives. We want to make sure that we can improve outcomes for the nearly 7 million children with disabilities, and our vision and our mission drives our work. So we're clear that we're not just moving paper from one side of our desk to the other side of our desk to someone else's desk. There are real kids attached to our work. And the extent to which we do our work well has a significant impact on our children, and that is not lost on us. And so, knowing the OSEP vision and the mission, because I'm sure you probably have something similar, how do they align with your priorities? Does everyone on your teams or in your districts or your families, your communities, do they know about what your priorities are and what you're working on and how they can support you and be helpful? Because they should. We'll talk a little bit about OSEP's work. We have formula and grant programs. So part of OSEP is made up of the Monitoring State Improvement Planning division, and one of the things that we do is administer formula grants. So the Part C grant for the early intervention for infants and toddlers, and the Part B grant to make sure that our kids get a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment from age 3 through at least 21. So we distribute these grants to states, and the states in turn allocate it and distribute them to the LEAs. That's how that works. And so I'm not going to, it's interesting, most people do not know how much in Part B we award every year. Hint, hint, it's more than you think. And there are places online where you can find out how much every LEA in the country is getting. We have a lot of data. So 14.5 billion with a B dollars is what we distribute. And these two QR codes will send you to places where you can find out more information. We have a lot of data, and we actually take pride in stopping to analyze the data and have conversations about the data and what it means for the rest of our work. In terms of what Indiana is doing, it's funny because I know Nancy. I've known Nancy for maybe almost 10 years now. It's been a minute. But when I asked our staff before I came, is there anything I need to know about Indiana? They're like, Nancy's fabulous. Indiana's doing great things. I have a willingness to talk and learn and grow, and we have great conversations, all the things that you want to hear. All the things you want to hear. So in terms of state level funds, because one of the things I greatly appreciate about Nancy is she's thoughtful and she's intentional, and that makes a difference. Things don't just happen by osmosis. Trust me, they don't. So $4.8 million reserved for personnel shortages, another $4.5 million reserved for, and you can see it on the screen, support and direct services. In terms of the third bullet, most people don't know this. Make sure that your wants and your wishes at the LEA level are known, because Nancy can't solve problems that she doesn't know exist. You have to be vocal. You have to speak up. We also have state leads. So the state leads in OSEP are the liaison between the state and the U.S. Department of Education. There's a state lead for Part C at the Department for Indiana, and a state lead for Part B for Indiana. Every state and entity, because we also provide money to the freely associated states, the entities Guam, Palau, Micronesia, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, the whole group. They all get funding for special education, federal funding. The state leads that we have talk to the states on at least a monthly basis, sometimes much more frequently, depending on what's going on whatever the day-to-day needs are. Constituent concerns, a lot of constituent concerns in general. Offering general support around the SPP APR plans that go in, the state systemic improvement plans, fiscal needs, monitoring. No one likes to be monitored, if I can add that. No one likes to be monitored. States don't like being monitored by us. You might not like being monitored by the state, but monitoring is not a gotcha. Monitoring is not someone coming in looking for something that's wrong. Monitoring is an opportunity to lift up some of the challenges and the problems that you're having and have a conversation about what might be done to fix it. I think we need to reframe what we think about monitoring. It doesn't have to be painful, and it can actually be helpful. So fiscal related needs, monitoring activities, that's what our state leads assist in on a regular basis, as well as the actual monitoring. And so the contacts for Indiana at OSEP are Part C contact, Part B contact, team leader, and customer service. So what a lot of people don't know is that we actually have people at the department in OSEP who serve a customer service function. We get phone calls and emails from across the country, occasionally educators, but for the most part, parents and families. Sometimes people just want someone to listen to them, and we do that. Sometimes they're having an issue and they want to know what their options are, and we can help them with that. We do not intervene in issues related to individual children. We refer them back to the state to deal with that. What we do deal with are systemic issues and patterns. And sometimes from the phone calls and emails that we get, we can identify systemic issues, which might result in conversations with the state, technical assistance, that kind of thing. We also administer discretionary grants, our Part D funding. And so there are a number of discretionary grants here in Indiana. The first one, the Parent Training Center, it still boggles my mind how many places across the country I go to, and people who've been in the field 20, 30 years have no idea what a Parent Training Center is, which is interesting. I think the parent training centers are one of our greatest investments. Every state has at least one. Larger states have more than one. And these are places where parents, families, educators, whomever, anywhere in the state can call, get someone to talk to about whatever their needs might be. I have a specific child with a specific disability and I'm having questions about this. There's someone to answer it based on what is happening in your state. So our parent training centers are fabulous. And actually, I think Nancy mentioned they were in the room. Where are the folks from our parent training center? You guys are usually quiet. Usually the PTI folks are loud and rowdy.
We were trying to be contained.
Okay, I appreciate you trying to be contained. You don't have to be, but that's okay. But thank you for your work. Because the work is not getting easier, it's getting harder, and there are more families that are reaching out to you for help. So we absolutely appreciate your work. Indiana also has a SPDIG program and a technical assistance project to improve results for kids who are deaf, blind. What Indiana is also doing is there's actually an active grant at Purdue on personnel prep. So I'm going to switch gears for a second and talk about a little bit about what OSEP has been focused on and some of the things that we put out and how they might be helpful to you. One of the things is, first thing is data analysis. We as a system collect a lot of data, a lot. I cannot say that we're always as good to go back and actually take a look at it. But the only way we can make good decisions is if we look at our data. And also, do we slice and dice our data, as my staff says at OSEP? Because you can look at some data and it might tell you one thing, but if you slice and dice it generally by race, ethnicity, or disability category, you will frequently get a very different picture of what's going on. And yes, we're all busy, but we have to stop and do it. This is part of the work. Instructional leadership. So IDEA is, how do I say this? Based on the history of IDEA, how it came about, the engagement of the field in general, IDEA is, there are some people out there that are very litigious, should I say, right? And I feel that sometimes we spend a lot of time being gatekeepers of the law and making sure nothing goes wrong, and being compliance driven, but who is focusing on what our kids are being taught? Who is focusing on that? Because if we want good outcomes, we need to know that our kids are being taught what they need to be taught. And if all we are focused on, or if we are primarily focused on state complaints and mediation and staying out of trouble and staying out of court in all forms, then who's paying attention to what our kids are being taught? Because what we're here to do is to make sure that our kids get what they need and that it's individualized. And we're talking about all populations, not just those that are easiest to teach. We're talking about also kids with moderate and significant needs. We're talking about kids that move often, our migrant kids and military connected. Who is paying attention to them? Collaboration and partnership is critical. I think you're aware, and I'm probably preaching to the choir, that we need to get out of and stay out of our silos. I was talking to Nancy earlier about conversations she's been having with principals. And can I tell you that for our kids, if the principal in the building, because honestly, that's where the rubber meets the road, is in the building. If the principal is supportive, things have a good chance of going well. And if the principal needs help, there can be barriers. We actually went to, the elementary and secondary principals had a joint conference this year, and we went there and had conversations with the principals, and we did presentations. And we're developing a closer relationship with the principals and our other gen ed partners, because if we want things to go well for our kids, it can't just be us talking to each other about our children, right? Because kids with disabilities are general education students first, which means we need to engage gen ed, which we don't always do well. And so how can we better partner with them? And in the department, we are partnered with our Office of Elementary and Secondary Education. We are partnering with other federal agencies. We're partnering with states, with our TA centers, other pertinent stakeholders. So my question to you is, how are you collaborating and partnering? And what does that look like? And you might be well on your way. But is there anything else that you need to lean into in terms of partnership and collaboration? It does not happen quickly. It takes time. And that's okay. Information dissemination. So broadly speaking, we have an information dissemination problem. The federal government, all the agencies we create, put out these great resources, give it to the states. States put out great resources or disseminate what we've done, put it out to the districts. Somewhere between the district and the building level, things get lost. And no one is quite sure who sees it, who gets it, if it's being used at all. And that's a problem. Because if we all take time to put all this together, evidence-based, we know it'll work. Tons of research, and it doesn't get into the hands of the people that need it, then we've missed the mark. Prime example, a number of years back, my child had a tutor. And she was a teacher in a third grade class for kids on the spectrum. And slowly but surely over the time, the principal had started putting kids who had behavior problems in her class because she knew how to handle them. But the problem is that all these kids didn't belong in her class. And so I said to her at the time, did you know we just put out guidance on discipline and behavior, and this might be helpful to your peers? And she said, I didn't know, can you send it to me? And so if it doesn't get into the hands of the people that actually need it, then what are we doing? Because information dissemination is not glamorous, it is not sexy, but it's 100% necessary. And if you're putting out information and you're not sure it's getting to the people that need it, then you need to rethink how you're putting out information. We actually have a community of practice that got going a couple years ago. People that are so excited about information dissemination, more excited than I've ever seen. They're talking about, are they using social media? Are they using websites? Are they looking at clicks or downloads? Or how are you measuring that what you're doing is getting out into the world? And I would suggest that you do the same. How are you making sure that the people around you have the information that they need? I'm going to spend a little bit more time on post-secondary transition. I call it Big T transition, as well as inclusionary practices. And Nancy, when I have probably like 5 to 7 minutes left. Just give me a high sign, just in case. So post-secondary transition, you can read this on your own, but what happened is I've done a lot of listening sessions since I came to the department because I want to know what's happening. And in the beginning when I came, it was kind of still during the pandemic. So couldn't quite get out into the field and have face-to-face conversations. And so I did a ton of listening sessions with a lot of groups of people about a lot of different things. And I did listening sessions with parents and with principals. And one of the many questions that I asked is, how's transition going? And in different listening sessions, they said to me, what transition? And it wasn't because of the pandemic. That was just one more thing on top of what was already going on. But what transition is a problem? So what we did is we started thinking through how do we improve secondary transition? Because if we all agree we're not here to just move papers around, right? We're not here to move our kids from 3rd grade to 5th grade to 8th grade. We're not here to move our kids from elementary school to middle school to high school. We're here to make sure that when they leave us, they have options and they have opportunities. That's our job. That's it. And so how do we make sure that is occurring? So when I was little, my parents, I have a younger sister, my parents started saying to us when we were probably about that high, when you grow up, you're going to college or you're going to the military. We were so young, we didn't even know what college or military was. We had no idea. But that's how early they started telling us. You're going to college or you're going to military, you're going to college or you're going to military. When you grow up, you're going to college or you're going to, right? So you got it already. And I just told you. At some point, they dropped the military and my mother added in, and you're going a 4-hour bus ride away. Because that's what mothers do. They want you to grow up, go become independent, come back home later. It's fine. So in all honesty, it would have been okay if my sister and I had decided that we wanted to become entrepreneurs or go into the military or go do any one of a million other things. But our parents created this vision. It sounded like a good idea, so we decided to go with it. Why don't we give our parents of our young kids with disabilities the same opportunity? Because we don't. We don't include our kids in career fairs. We don't ask them what they want to be when they grow up. Most parents of kids with disabilities that are elementary school age, they believe their child will finish school and be back home on their couch. They don't think there are any options. They don't think there are any opportunities. They think they will always live at home. Now we know better. We know there are many options. But why aren't we planting those seeds early? We don't have to have a full transition conversation with the parent of a 2-year-old. But why don't we plant the seeds to let them know that there are options and that transition is coming, to give them the opportunity to create that vision for their child. Because when we don't, and we wait till 14 or 16 and we start pulling out checklists and going through things, it's too late. Because they've had all that time to believe that there was no hope and nothing was going to happen. And we can do better. And we're not talking about something that's expensive. We're talking about planting seeds, letting people know that something is coming. We're talking about setting ourselves up and our families so that, one, we start having these conversations earlier and planting the seeds, and that when we actually get to transition age, it is seamless and it is meaningful. I can't tell you how many times I have heard from education folks, we invited VR and they didn't show up. And I've told VR audiences, I don't want to hear that anymore. But I've also heard from VR folks, Ed won't let us in. They won't let us in the building. So as I mentioned earlier, the collective we can do better. How do we have meaningful transition planning that includes VR, includes education, and considers the strengths and desires of our children? How do we And can we, please, stop steering certain students in certain disability categories towards certain types of work? You know what I'm talking about. Food, trash, recycling, gardening. If a student has an interest in that, that's fine. But let's not make that decision for them because we think that's what they're capable of and that's it. Our students can be entrepreneurs. They can go into trades. They can go into college. So 2 years ago, I went to what's called the State of the Art Conference. It's still being put on. It's a conference that has providers and families as well as individuals that are in post-secondary programs. They have joint plenaries, but then they have 2 separate conferences. So I did a listening session with the kids, and I call them kids because at my age they're all kids, but they were technically college students. Moderate and significant needs. And I say to them, like, what do you enjoy about college? And it was all the things you'd expect. The food, I can eat pizza, hamburgers, french fries every day, right? The basketball games, the football games, it was all that. All the things you would expect to hear from a college student that they were enjoying about their experience. When I said to the students, what's hard? It wasn't the work. Navigating the bus schedule, knowing where I'm supposed to be all the time. Everything they told me led back to executive functioning. Everything. And we know we can start working on executive functioning at the earliest of ages. So once again, I ask what we're doing and are we being intentional about it? Earlier this year, I told you we went to, I spoke at the National Down Syndrome Congress Convention in Arizona, in Phoenix, and they had a college fair. Think College had a college fair. There are over 300 colleges across the country, all over the country, that have programs for students with intellectual disabilities and those on the spectrum that need more support needs. And they had a couple hallways, and just old school college fair. Tables set up, they had staff from the schools, and I mean Clemson and George Mason and California, Texas, New Orleans, like all across the country. They also had students that had attended the programs talking about their experiences, talking about what they were doing now, talking about living on their own. So as I mentioned earlier, college is for anyone who wants to go. And when I asked the kids at the State of the Art Conference, who told you about the program that you're in? It wasn't us. It was a parent that researched it. It was someone at their church, mosque, synagogue, someone in the community. It was someone outside of our system. And that shouldn't be the case. So what we did is we created 3E. It's a transition initiative so that we could raise awareness about some of the things that we would like to see in relation to transition. And so we had blogs. We did 3 symposia, which are up on our website still, we recorded. And the symposia were really great. We included providers and practitioners. We included individuals with disabilities and family members. We included VR. We included education folks, the partnership and collaboration. It was fabulous. And so if you missed it at the time, go back and take a look at that, because it was deeply meaningful, and that work is going to continue. So I'm going to switch gears for a second, and I'm going to talk about inclusionary practices. So what we want to do is make sure every child has what they need, when they need it, how often they need it. And we want to make sure that our kids get rigorous high quality instruction, and that there are high expectations. So we need to be mindful and be careful that we know our kids are supposed to be getting FAPE and the LRE. We have to be mindful and make sure that we're not giving our kids what's easiest or what's available. Because that A in FAPE is for appropriate, it's not for available. think everyone here would agree to that. And there are things in the law we need to consider, requirements related to teachers and special factors, but the IEP is the basis of the entitlement. Now, inclusion is not an IDEA. It's not. But regular class is. And it's important because this is the data that we collect. So the concept of regular class matters because we want to know exactly where our children are receiving services, especially if we want to make sure that they're getting them in the least restrictive environment and that they are only removed from the regular class due to the nature or the severity of their disability. And there are many considerations for how this gets defined, but because it doesn't define it, surprise, surprise, we did listening sessions. It's out of curiosity. From people around the country, we did listening sessions with states and with districts to figure out from our stakeholders and our constituents how they view regular class. And as you can guess, there was a lot of variability in what we heard. Some groups were focusing on who was teaching the class. Some focused on what was being taught. Some focused on the composition of the class. So we heard everything from natural proportions to a percentage. So one state told us more than 50-50. One state told us a 3-to-1 ratio. One state told us not to exceed 33% or 70-30, right? There are 6 states that have definitions based on percentages. And even one person in one district who is not in this state, I'll just mention, so that Nancy doesn't freak out on me. One person in one district, not in this state, pretty much told us, and I thought it was just me for a second, but I looked at my staff and I could see by their responses that they heard the same thing I heard. He pretty much said, we just put all the kids together, it'll happen. They'll learn by osmosis. Said that out loud. Things don't happen that way. They need to be intentional. So it kind of made us wonder how states and districts and schools and families and educators are interpreting that component of the law and how we can best provide support. Because once again, that's what we're here to do. We're here to provide support so that what you do is easier and you have what you need. So regular class refers to location or placement, but the general education refers to the curriculum. So this is where I'm going to tie in some data because data can tell a tremendous story. So in the 22-23 school year, this is the school age educational environments data. And that large blue section is what most of us know, that a large percentage of children with disabilities are spending time in the regular class 80% or more of the day. We all know that. And then the other smaller percentages are things like private school, separate school, homebound, hospital, correctional facility, okay? But these are all the disability categories. So what disability categories do you think are represented in that 80% or more of the day? You probably already know where I'm going with this. So in that 80% that we saw here, that large blue section, 38, a little over 38% have specific learning disabilities. A little over 23% speech language impairments. Other health impairments, a little over 17%. And might I add that other health impairment is a bit of a grab bag category. You know what I'm talking about. Like, some of those kids really do have health-related impairments, but it's also been my observation that some parents don't want their kids labeled because they don't want them winding up in certain places or getting services that they don't agree that they should be getting. So you might find kids with intellectual disabilities in the other health impairment category because that was the preference and the IEP team was, okay, that works. So other health impairment is a bit of a grab bag. I'm not sure that we can definitely pinpoint who all is in there. And then you see autism, 7.75%, spending 80% or more of their day. dropping down to emotional disability of 3.75%, and you will not be shocked to learn 1.72% intellectual disability in the regular classroom, dropping precipitously down to deafblindness with 0.01%. So if we just looked at that initial slide, that pie chart that shows 80% or more of the day, then we think things are going okay, especially if the numbers in there are increasing over time. But once again, are we slicing and dicing that data? This is just a slice and dice by disability category. If you further slice and dice it by race and ethnicity or gender, there's another story there too. I'm not going to go into that story, but I encourage you to slice and dice your own data to see, is what you think is going on actually going on? High quality inclusive programs have all of these components because we know there's clearly room for improvement, right? There are a lot of moving puzzle pieces here. But you have to look at your data, you have to strategize, you have to figure out what type of alignment is there. Are your initiatives in alignment with what your data is telling you needs to be done? I'm going to highlight on here a couple things. One is to intentionally promote children's participation in all activities, which sounds very easy. It's not always done. We had the Teacher of the Year at the OSEP Leadership Conference earlier this year. She's in Virginia. And you might remember her because she took a picture with Taylor Swift. That seems to be the thing that most people remember. And she was fabulous. She was great, very intentional, very smart, just trying to figure out how can I make this accessible to everyone? Not just the kids, but also the parents. How can I make this better? But she intentionally did that. I know my child one year had an art teacher, and it's interesting how information comes to you. I found out that the art teacher was allowing my child, kind of probably pushed him over there, to sit in the corner doing something else during art class. He wasn't doing what everyone else was doing. As you can imagine, that did not make me happy. My first thought was, what message does that send to him, right? What message does that send to the other kids in the class? And for how many years has she been doing this to other kids? That was the OSEP director thought. As a parent, I had a whole different set of thoughts, but I will not go into those right now. So we have to intentionally promote our kids' participation in all activities. Are we recognizing families as collaborative partners? Because they are experts, and they should be engaged in the decision-making process. We should value them and treat them with respect. And I'm not saying you don't, but we just need to be mindful. We also need to make sure that supports are in place for early childhood programs. That's important, because when that self-containment starts early, it tends to continue. And when our kids are included with other kids early, that tends to continue. And so do the processes that we have in place and the partnerships support that? Does the professional development support that? We've done a lot of work in the field. Another QR code, once again, who doesn't love a good QR code? Here it will take you to a place where you can see a lot of the guidance that we have put out. And so one of the things we put out just, was it last week? Time is a blur. And so I can't tell you exactly when, but we put out guidance on functional behavior assessments. Because one of the things that I learned in my travels is that they are not being used. People had questions on who should be doing it, who should we be doing it on, how often can we do it, who takes ownership of it, is it only for kids with disabilities? Many questions. And coming back from the pandemic, we also simultaneously heard we are having more behavior problems in class, in general, more than we had before. So this just came out. We are facing a challenge with exclusionary discipline rates. They are alarmingly high, which disproportionately impacts black boys and children with disabilities. The CDC has called exclusionary discipline public health concern. And we already know, and research tells us, that we cannot suspend our way to better behavior. So what we did is we created this guidance. It's been a long time in the making. It describes what an FBA is, common characteristics, how they can inform instructional strategies, guiding principles, and that it's an evidence-based strategy that can and should be used more widely to support the behavioral needs of students with and without disabilities. And we signed this in conjunction with our Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, because once again, we want to get out of our silo and make sure we reach out to our gen ed partners. We've also put out a Dear Colleague letter and guidance on AT. It's very easy to read. It takes the form of myths and facts. There's a section for Part C and for Part B. What it is, what it can be used for, who should be paying for it, all the things. Okay? One of the things I've been determined to do since I've been at OSEP is to have guidance that is not 500 pages long, that you don't need a PhD to read. No one has time for that. It needs to be easy to digest, easy to read, easy to understand, and implement. So that's what we've been working on since I've been at the department. We've also done guidance on discipline and behavior. 3 documents in this: a Dear Colleague letter, a Q&A, and a technical assistance document. We put this out, I believe it was a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, but we're still talking about it because the field still wants more information about it. We also put out guidance on general supervision, as well as recently we did a self-assessment that had to do with military-connected and migrant families. Because what we're finding is that we know that these families move around a lot and they don't always get the services they need for a variety of reasons. So we created a self-assessment to help states and districts figure out, where are you, and this is voluntary, doesn't need to be turned into us. Where are you in relation to your systems and how you serve these populations? Are there things that you need to consider changing that would make it easier? So we have a vast TA network. We have a resource probably on almost everything. We have 5 different categories of TA, and we have something for everyone. This code will take you to our TA network, and this code right here will take you to all things IDEA, statutes, regulations, monitoring letters, newsletter, and might I add, you should subscribe to our monthly newsletter. When I first came to the department, I think we were at 10 or 14,000 subscriptions, and now we're up to 100,000. And that doesn't even account for the people that say that they forward it to other people that aren't subscribed themselves. There is valuable information in these free newsletters that come out every month, not just whatever my random thoughts are for that month. And you can go back and see the old ones as well, but also information from our technical assistance centers, the webinars they're putting on, the campaigns they're doing, where they're presenting, new resources, all the things. And it's all out there to help you and to make your job easier, because we want to support you so that you can better support our children. So, once again, I want to thank Nancy for the invitation. I want to thank all of you for being here. I think for a minute we all got very comfortable to do things virtually, which is nice, and sometimes it's necessary. But something magical happens when you get in a room with people and you feel their energy and you look them in the eye and you have real conversations. It just does. And you made time to be here, and that's important. So once again, I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for the invitation. Enjoy the rest of today and tomorrow, and I appreciate you.